The first one is Goliath announcing some visuals out of, I think it was 4 drill holes at this Treasure Island target, which is part of the Gold Digger property, way up to the north end. So you can see a little red star towards the top of the image. That's near Stewart, okay, which is probably like 40, 50 kilometers, I think, north of Kitsault. And sure bet where they've been drilling for years now is down there towards the south, more close to Kitsault. But they've tested this target at Treasure Island, and they came away with some really interesting visuals this week. All right, so one of those I want to talk about the visuals. Go to the next slide. Yeah, this is basically a little window that's of rock sticking out through the glacier. There's a lot of glacier here, guys. Just the heads up, okay? But last year they did some rock sampling, cut channels and stuff on this little island, they call it, of rock sticking out of the glacier. And they got some really, really good numbers. Well, now they've drilled it, and they're seeing similar rock in drill core. Yeah, this is very interesting. It's a very early stage discovery, but it's very interesting. There are other targets that are just like off to the northwest from here, not targets, but deposits that we know of that are also probably of this ilk. This looks to me like VMS, so it's volcanogenic massive sulfide material. It's in the right rocks. It's basically in the same rocks that SK Creek is, okay? So it's in the Hazelton group, in the same part of the section. And we're seeing rock in the core that looks for all the world like VMS. All right. So the textures that we see over here on the right, without going into great detail, are very fine grained sulfides kind of laced through the rock. To me, that looks like maybe feeder style mineralization for a VMS. The bright yellow is chalcopyrite, meaning copper rich. And it matches some of the samples they collected at surface last year, some of which had very high grade gold and copper, which is what you see in the top. This is encouraging. I mean, basically, they're seeing some of the same things in the drill core that they saw last year. You know, look, is this the easiest project in the world? No, it's in a glacier. But let's see what they get out of this. And I did help, I pointed them to a geophysicist. I'm hoping they can get some geophysics done and see if they can evaluate the target a little better before the end of the season. But this is exciting. This is exciting. It looks like a discovery level or stage thing to me. Let's go to the next slide. Okay. And I think Kevin referenced, sometimes we get bad news. Okay. There's, this is kind of disappointing news. All right. Rackla Metals had a news release this week. Now, this is where, I'm going to say this like before I talk about it, is that sometimes people complain when companies don't talk about what they're seeing and doing. Like, in other words, they just kind of go off the reservation and you don't hear from them for a long time. In this case, these guys have been very forthwith and put out some news about their drilling at the hit zone or the hit target, as well as peak. Okay, and they basically didn't see enough to really feel they were compelled to continue the drilling. So at hit, they did some additional drill holes, 3 and 4, to try to follow up on some very long low grade hits last year, kind of long half gramish stuff. And they were hopeful that they would see increasing grades as they drilled these holes. Unfortunately, it sounds like the step out holes did not see increased visuals nor grades. I think they still have some assays to come back, but basically they didn't feel comfortable drilling more holes and spending more money. Sometimes stuff happens, right? I mean, that shard happens and you got to move on. Okay, go to the next slide. Over on the left, they also talk about the peak target. This is a target. It's part of the Kelvin stock granite. So this is actually to the west from hit. Hit was over on the border between Northwest Territories and the Yukon. This is in the Yukon. Anyway, at peak, there was a lot of carapace, basically a roof of sedimentary rock over a granite. But there's a lot of gold leaking out of this thing. And these guys were trying to test down through that sediment to see if they could find the sheeted veins going down into the granite. Again, it sounds like they didn't come up with what they wanted to see. They talk about weak stock work with subeconomic gold values. Again, disappointing, but that's how she goes sometimes. Let's see. The next update over here on the right is about where they're continuing work. Okay, so I emailed Simon straight after. I said, are you just throwing in the towel? Oh no, by no means. We actually have more work going, and it's outlined here. So basically, they're working at the CERC target, which is near peak or part of peak program, and they're going to follow up there because there was a lot of gold in Talus finds there. They're also doing soil sampling on some new targets, black and flat. That's outlined in the middle there. Those are further south from HIT, so more over towards the Northwest Territories. And then they've also added this grad property, which is 60 kilometers southeast of APC, so the peak area. But this is a brand new target. Okay, so these guys haven't given up. They're just moving on to new targets. That's what you have to do sometimes as an exploration company. All right, go to the next slide. I think I got just 2 or 3 more slides. Okay, Novo. Again, disclaimer, I'm co-chairman of Novo. We have a number of tenements in what we call the East Pilbara. So this is the east half of the region that we've been exploring for quite some time now. We have had to work with, diligently work with the Aboriginals in this area to get access to work on these targets. But we've done that recently, and we're trying to follow up on these because these are pretty high quality targets for us that we haven't been able to advance. But the bamboo and Miralga targets I'll talk about briefly here. The Miralga target in particular it yielded some incredible samples a couple of years ago. We didn't really have a chance to talk about them at that time because we had to go through the native title stuff. But basically, there were some really remarkable grades came out. 15-gram gold, 10 kilos silver in a sample, very high base metals, copper, lead, zinc. Wow, what is this? Okay, let's talk about it more. Go to the next slide. I'm actually going to just touch on bamboo. Bamboo, there's a lot of gold over there that is very interesting. It's very crystalline gold, and it's kind of like what I talked about early in the presentation. There was a system that generated some super high grades. Whether there's any size to it, I don't know. I've been out there. I've done it with my metal, a metal detector. I know there's a lot of little crystals of gold coming out. There's a picture in the news release of a hand holding a bunch of gold. That's my hand. Okay, it's an interesting target, but I'm not staking my life on it. But we're going to do some work over there to figure out, or see if we can figure out where that gold's coming from. The one I want to talk about is Miralga, which is over on the left-hand side of the left image. We have a block of tenements through there, and in there we have a number of intrusions that are believed to be heat sources for VMS systems within the rock package here. Okay, so we think that when these rocks in this Miralga region were on the seafloor, there were some magmas that drove volcanogenic massive sulfide systems, and we've gotten some really good numbers out of surface sampling. Go to the next slide. In particular, at this, there we go, at Gully Washer, you can see the samples we got. It's not a huge target. It's a relatively modest scale target, but it's really interesting to see such high grade come out of these spot rock chips. These are just rock chip samples. They're not channels and stuff like that. It is in an oxidized environment. What that means, don't know exactly, but this looks like a target we need to drill. So we're going to go in and follow up on these exciting results. You never know. Sometimes you find the craziest thing in the craziest place after years and years, but interesting target, and we will test it.